Well, we have a long way to go in this canto because it is all Sri Aurobindo's experiences in the pseudonym of Ashwapati, and he is telling us even things that are now in the record of yoga. So we are seeing what he's going through as he's rising higher and higher in his consciousness. And then there are many, many pages to go yet in this. Before we get to Book 1, Canto 4, and then Book 1, Canto 5 again, it's going to be his realizations. These are his experiences basically, but they're also his realizations, and we have to keep that in mind. So we've just been through many, many things that he's experienced, and I'll go back just a few lines to inaudible to our deaf mortal ears. So inaudible, of course, is not loud enough to be heard. The wide world rhythms wove their stupendous chant. And we see here again the alliteration of Sri Aurobindo that comes again and again, wide world wove. And the stupendous chant is a chant of astounding force or volume or degree, to which life strives to fit our rhyme beats here, melting our limits in the illimitable. The illimitable is boundless. It has no limits at all. Tuning the finite to infinity. And that's where we have our full stop and where we ended last week. All of this he's experiencing in his journey to where he's going to be. He will call Ashwapati a sage, and he does not call him an avatar, but he calls him a sage. So let's begin. A low muttering rose from the subconscious caves. And this is such an important word of Sri Aurobindo, this term subconscious. And I want to share a little bit with you from his various works. In the Synthesis of Yoga, he says, in our yoga, we mean by the subconscious that quite submerged part of our being in which there is no wakingly conscious and coherent thought, will or feeling, or organized reaction, but which yet receives obscurely the impressions of all things and stores them up in itself, and from it too all sorts of stimuli of persistent habitual movements, crudely repeated or distinguished in strange forms, can surge up into dream or into the waking nature. Subliminal is a general term used for all parts of the being which are not on the waking surface. Subconscient is very often used in the same sense by European psychologists because they do not know the difference. But when I use the word, and here we see Sri Aurobindo using the word I, which he rarely ever uses, most often. But when I use the word, I mean always what is below the ordinary physical consciousness below, not what is behind it. The inner mental, vital, physical, the psychic are not subconscious in this sense, but they can be spoken of as subliminal. And he says in his letters on yoga, just one more, just as the higher consciousness is superconscient to us and supports all our spiritual possibilities and nature, so the subconscient is the basis of our material being and supports all that comes up in the physical nature. A low muttering rose from the subconscious caves, the stammer of the primal ignorance. Again, we have two words that are important here. A stammer, we know it's almost a stuttering, but it's a way of speaking characterized by faulting, involuntary pauses or repetitions. And then primal, original, it's primeval. Answer to that inarticulate questioning, there stooped with lightning neck a radiant hymn to the inexpressible and the anthem of the superconscient light. A few more important words. Of course, inarticulate, we understand it's sort of not uttered or emitted with an expressive or an intelligible modulation. So it's simply not articulate. And then this radiant hymn. A hymn is always a song of praise or thanksgiving to God or a deity. Inexpressible, Sri Aurobindo capitalizes here. He wants us to know it's very, very important, this radiant hymn to the inexpressible. And the inexpressible is something that is incapable of being uttered or described in words. And the anthem of the superconscient light. Now, an anthem is a little different from a hymn. It's a kind of song of praise, true, devotion, but patriotism or gladness. And then after the full stop, he continues, all was revealed there, none can here express. Vision and dream were fables spoken by truth, or symbols more veridical than fact. That's very, very interesting. These things that he's experiencing are revealed there, but no one here can express them. We don't have that spiritual realm of consciousness, or maybe a couple of you have it, I don't yet. So we cannot express it here. Because he wants to tell us after that semicolon, that vision and dream were fables spoken by truth. And we so often have these symbols or fables or stories that are contained in Savitri, expressed in many, many different ways by Sri Aurobindo, so we can begin to get some idea, some feeling of it. So this vision and this dream were fables spoken by truth or symbols more veridical than fact. Veridical is truthful, actual, real. Now we have here the word symbols. And what did I tell you last week? Who remembers it? The word symbol. When Sri Aurobindo begins Savitri, he says it is a legend and a symbol. So it's the symbols that are even truer than fact. Most interesting. Or were truths enforced by supernatural seals. Now he's going into a different aspect. Immortal eyes approached and looked in his, and beings of many kingdoms neared and spoke. And there's a colon at the end of that, because this is so important. The ever-living, whom we name as dead, could leave their glory beyond death and birth to utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase. Another colon. So he's going to continue this, and it's very connected. And I believe I might have told you about my second darshan with Sri Aurobindo in the subtle physical. He is walking towards me and speaking with two people. One was Nolini, I remember that very clearly. And the other one was Purani, who passed away in the same year as my experience. Yet Sri Aurobindo was speaking to both of them just before he came up to me. So one is dead, according to us. The other is living. We really don't die. And that is the great lesson I learned from this experience. We only change our dress as we go to our place of rest and prepare for our next birth. So the ever-living, whom we name as dead, could leave their glory beyond death and birth. And what would they do? To utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase. The kings of evil and the kings of good, appellants at the reason's judgment seat, proclaimed the gospel of their opposites, and all believed themselves spokesmen of God. So these ever-living souls are able to utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase. Now, the kingdoms of evil and the kings of evil and the kings of good, these are the ones we know as gods or demons. And they are appellants. Now, an appellant is someone who appeals to a higher tribunal. So in the court case, we have an appellant who's appealing or entreating to the judge. And they are proclaiming the gospel of their opposites. Very interesting. Now, a gospel is, in this sense that Sri Aurobindo is using it, a doctrine regarded as of prime importance. We can also call it a revelation from heaven, which is the usual definition. And I think that's relevant here, because they are the kings of evil and the kings of good. And they do believe themselves spokesmen of God. And so they proclaim the gospel of their opposites, the revelations they have received. And after that colon, so we have to remember that we had a colon after phrase and now a colon after God. So it's all tying in together. And he says, the gods of light and titans of the dark battled for his soul as for a costly prize. And I'm going to quote you from Essays Divine and Human, because this is something we know and have heard about and have been taught for many years. The old writings call the Titans the elder gods. So they still are. Nor is any god entirely divine unless there is hidden in him also a Titan. And then he will tell us again in Essays Divine and Human, the mental or vital demigod, the Asura, Rakshasa, and Pisacha, Titan, vital giant and demon, are superhuman in the pitch and force and movement and in the make of their characteristic nature. But these are not divine. And those are not supremely divine, for they live in a greater mind power or life power only, but they do not live in the supreme truth, and only the supreme truth is divine. Only those who live in a supreme truth consciousness and embody it are inwardly made or else remade in the divine image. So these gods of light, these titans of the dark. Now he does not capitalize Titan here, and we went through that very carefully a few weeks back. These are just huge beings who live in an inordinately magnified shadow. So they are battling for his soul as for a costly prize. Now, why are they doing this? Well, he is ascending and ascending and ascending, and they want him to align with themselves. So they are gods of light and titans of the dark who believe themselves spokesmen of God. And now he has something very important. In every hour, loosed from the quiver of time. So we have loosed, which means released or freed or let loose. And the quiver, of course, is the portable case for holding arrows. So we have the quiver of time. Now, I'll quote two quatrains from William Butler Yeats, employing the word loosed. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So, in every hour, loosed from the quiver of time, what happened? There rose a song of new discovery. A bow twangs, and here's how he tie back the quiver, a bow twang's hum of young experiment. And the bow twang we might have heard when people are shooting arrows. There's a twang as the string releases the arrow. So that's the bow twang hum. But what is it? It's of young experiment. Each day was a spiritual romance, as if he was born into a bright new world. Adventure leaped an unexpected friend, and danger brought a keen, sweet tang of joy. A tang, of course, we know is a distinctive, penetrating taste or flavor. We have so many tangs in our spices in India. Each happening was a deep experience. Now he's going to take us a little higher. There were high encounters, epic colloquies, and counsels came couched in celestial speech, and honeyed pleadings breathed from occult lips, to help the heart to yield to rapture's call. And sweet temptations stole from beauty's realms, and sudden ecstasies from a world of bliss. He's experiencing all of these things. Colloquies are formal conversations or dialogues. And these counsels, we almost have, again, alliteration. We have counsels, can't we do? Counsels came couched, 3 in a row. Celestial, of course, is pronounced differently, but counsels came couched. Beautiful alliteration. Those counsels are knowledgeable sources who give advice or guidance. Now, couched here means framed in words, put into words, expressed. And then we have the honeyed pleadings, breathed from occult lips, to help the heart to yield to rapture's call. And sweet temptations stole from beauty's realms, and sudden ecstasies from a world of bliss, from a world of bliss. It was a region of wonder and delight. All now his bright clairaudience could receive. The clairaudience is the power to hear sounds that are beyond the reach of our ordinary capacity. So we have clairvoyance, clairaudience, all these different ranges that one day, of course, will be possible to all of us when we become supramentalized. All now his bright clairaudience could receive. See, he's gone up so high already. He's thrown away these things of the human existence, desires, endless thoughts, the body with its tamasic nature. All these things are already gone. And yet, there's much more that he's going to receive. And we're going to see in cantos in the future that he feels he hasn't accomplished anything. And that's when he calls upon the divine to send him a helper, an answering soul. Again, this is tied in with Savitri and Satyavan, but it's also Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. She comes from France, he's Indian, and we know all of the problems that created with many of the early disciples who could not accept that a woman from France could be identical to Sri Aurobindo. A contact thrilled of mighty unknown things, awakened to new unearthly closenesses. The touch replied to subtle infinities, and with a silver cry of opening gates, sight's lightnings leaped into the invisible. Now these lightnings are from the illumined mind. It's a mind that's no longer of higher thought, but it's of spiritual light. And here the clarity of the spiritual intelligence, its tranquil daylight, gives place or subordinates itself to an intense luster, a splendor and illumination of the spirit, a play of lightnings, of spiritual truth and power, breaks from above into the consciousness and adds to the calm and wide enlightenment and the vast descent of peace, which characterize or accompany the action of the larger conceptual spiritual principle, a fiery ardor of realization and a rapturous ecstasy of knowledge. And that is from the Life Divine.
Could I just ask one quick question that's been sort of...
Certainly, surely.
It starts out with low mutterings from the subconscious caves, and then everything that proceeds from there is higher and higher. So is it because of the answer to that inarticulate questioning that all of these other experiences were that came?
I don't feel it's exactly that. It's just his consciousness widening out, and these beings from all these different planes come to him. They're entreating him to join them. And then he this stammer of the primal ignorance is answer to that inarticulate questioning is this radiant hymn to the inexpressible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the anthem of the superconscious light.
Okay, thank you.